grateful that you are joining us today for this very special session about identity and DNA in the Middle East and North Africa. RootsTech, just to give you a little bit of an introduction, RootsTech is the world's largest family history conference, and it is organized by Family Search, a nonprofit organization whose purpose is to bring people joy by connecting them across the generations, past, present, and future. Actually, today, the RootsTech conference is taking place in person in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States, with about 15,000 people that will be coming to the conference center, attending over 200 classes, all about learning to discover their ancestors from all around the world. But what's more exciting, we have over 10 million people who will be also joining rootstech.org online for free with hundreds of classes from all around the world. And we hope that you will take some time to, after the session, explore some of the classes related to the Middle East and North Africa, as well as perhaps other parts of the world. On RootsTech, there's also some really fun classes about heritage, about cooking, about how to preserve photos, as well as how to discover ancestry. We have several classes on Ottoman records, which are so in the region of the Middle East. But today we're here really to talk about DNA, and I would like to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Pierre Zalloua, who is joining us from Abu Dhabi, and we're really so appreciative of him being there, especially with everything happening in the region. But I just would like to introduce Dr. Zalloua a little bit about him. He is he's a DNA expert, and he is a population geneticist focusing primarily on the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean region. He's also the author of a book that was just published in 2025 titled Ancestors, Identity, and DNA in the Levant. And I have the book, and I was just telling Dr. Zalloua that it's in tatters. I've just gone back and read it, and there's so much great information in there. So I really appreciate him having written this topic. We talk a lot about DNA, and a lot of times it's very much addressed to a Western population. So it was so great to have a book very much for our part of the world, as my family comes from Palestine, Lebanon. Also, he is a graduate from the University of California at Davis, and has also has advanced degrees from Harvard University, and he's held academic positions at Harvard University in the United States, Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi, as well as Lebanese University, the American University of Beirut, and Bellarmine University in Lebanon. He's currently teaching at Khalifa University at this time. He's also co-authored over 150 peer-reviewed articles, and was featured on a special National Geographic segment entitled Quest for the Phoenicians, which is always the big subject, certainly from an ancestral perspective in Lebanon. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Zalloua, and welcome to RootsTech.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very thrilled to be here on this program, and really excited to share and interact with you and whoever is actually listening to us today.
Wonderful. It's cutting out a little bit, but that's okay. We still can hear you pretty well. So I'm just going to dive right into it. You know, DNA is such a hot topic in genealogy and family history today. Everybody wants to know what their DNA tells about them, where they're from, where their ancestors may have migrated from. And it's interesting and not really very surprising as people, take DNA tests and then they find out that they have such a mix of different ancestry. And so we're here to talk a little bit about that today, like what brings about this mix, but from your perspective, why are people so interested in DNA research and in their DNA?
Well, first, I think DNA is a very interesting idea. And it became more interesting over the last 20 years because a lot of research actually that was conducted in research labs made it into the public domain. And people now can talk about DNA. You see DNA in almost every film. So people talk about DNA, and it became in vogue when a lot of companies started to use DNA as a tool to tell people where they come from and tell people about their ancestry and stories about their ancestors. And I think that was very interesting to a lot of people. Not to talk about the medical field and what DNA brought to the medical field as well. So these two perspectives, the medical and the ancestry perspective, made it very appealing to the public in general.
Yeah, I know some people, you're right. The medical aspect too is important as people kind of look to see if there's certain diseases that run in their families and things like that. And certainly people have used DNA to connect with other family members, and grow their family tree, so to speak. Yeah, thank you so much. So at the risk of maybe oversimplifying, can you just talk a little bit about how DNA works? How is it used to trace ancestral lines?
Yes. So let's think of DNA as a book. Okay. It's written in letters, literally in letters. There are 4 letters, GATC, and imagine it like a book, and then you copy that book. Let's say at the start you had 1 copy, and then you make multiple copies of that book, and then as you copy the book, you introduce mistakes in transcribing this book, and then eventually these mistakes, they accumulate, and then you can go back and trace back the original mistake, or basically trace back your ancestry this way. So it's really, if you think about it as a sequence of sentences in a book, and then you can trace back, starting from today backwards, you would expect after, let's say, thousands and thousands of generations or copies of that book, you will have more mistakes from when the first copy was made. And that's how we do it. So the more mistakes you have in a book, the more likely this is recent, and then you work your way backwards. That's basically how we trace back our ancestors. And then there are 2, if you wish, 2 types of DNA that we work with. We work with a DNA that is present in the nucleus, which gives us all the genes, and the Y chromosome, where we trace paternal ancestry. But we can also look at the mitochondrion, yes, which is, as you see in the picture here, the mitochondrion will only be given from the maternal side. So we can trace your maternal ancestry by using mitochondrion, and we could use your paternal ancestry from the Y chromosome, which is present in the nucleus, and many other traits that we can now use using the nuclear DNA.
That's great. And so how far back are you able to go to trace the DNA?
Well, you can go back now 500. Let me take it back. So we can go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. We have reached a limit right now, but I think every few years we push this limit back. But we can go back thousands and thousands of years back. We can do some model analysis whereby we can deduce, we can model how our ancestors were based on modern DNA. But now we have another powerful tool, which is to take DNA from ancient samples that have been laying in the ground for thousands and thousands of years, and then sequence those and compare them to modern DNA. And that actually has been extremely helpful to us to make these comparisons, because prior to that, we were assuming. So we actually we predict, how our DNA looked like 1,000 years back or 10,000 years back. But now we can actually determine how our ancient DNA was by looking at these ancient samples, which are actually teeth or bones, skeleton remains that actually have been preserved in the ground.
Wow, it's really amazing that you're able to connect such a huge time period of history, with people's remains from that and kind of predict. Can you tell us a little bit more about like the DNA of the region? We're here to talk about Middle East and North Africa. What have you learned about the DNA of the region?
Well, how far back you want to go? So let me explain. A lot of the a lot of things that when I started, my genetics journey or my DNA journey, I thought, yes, DNA is gonna tell me a lot of things and tell us a lot of things, but little did I know that yes, it's a small player, but we have to look at the geography, we have to look at the climate and at the environment, how people lived, and you quickly realized that the climate and the geography played a huge role in how people actually spread, and how people came to our region. If I take you back, I don't want to take you back, 50,000 years, which is around, or 50 to 60,000 years, where our common ancestors, the modern human, as we call them, started to leave Africa and populate the rest of the globe. Let's put that aside, because around during a period that we call the last glaciation period, which ended around 18,000 years ago, the entire region for thousands and thousands of years was uninhabited. Okay, so if you take the Eastern Mediterranean, the Levant, where we come from, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, this region was practically uninhabited except for small pockets that I call refuge. Okay, so because the ice was in Europe still there, it made the climate very dry where we are, and more so across the entire region, even in Arabia. So really, back then, not a lot of people actually were living. Okay, so when the ice melted, these refugia, which had small groups of people, started to expand out of these refugia. And then we note that there are three main original, if you wish, ancestors to us, to the people of the region, that actually have been able to live through all these severe climate periods. And these, I call them, without going into too much details here, these were the Natufians, in relation to Wadi Natuf, which is in Jordan down to the south. They lived in the southern part of the Levant, okay, and they expanded. And then another group from the Anatolian plains, south and north of that as well, also expanded. They were actually hiding in the Anatolian plains. And then a third group, actually made it from, the plateau, the Iranian plateau, at the foothill of the Iranian plateau there. And then actually they started to expand. And we believe that these three main ancestors actually made up the rest of the population that actually still lives in this region since then, almost uninterrupted for 15,000 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So I remember in your book reading, like, kind of started in Africa, and then they started to spread, and as you explained, into all these different regions. And I appreciate you also kind of talking a little bit about the environmental aspects, that kind of caused these migrations. Obviously, people had to survive and to subsist. How did it affect the culture of the people?
Yes. Well, these three cultures that existed were very small cultures initially, right? They were hunter-gatherers mostly. And then when the ice melted, they started to be more sedentary, meaning that they didn't move a lot. They started moving slowly. And then as they grew in number, they realized that they need to do something about food, and they started, storing food and doing some initial, farming or agriculture, and that's how agriculture happened. Really, not too far from where we are. We call it the Fertile Crescent and Mesopotamia, between the two rivers in between Iraq, actually, modern day Iraq right now, and that's how it started. So people, after leading a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, because they were in small groups and they needed to be mobile, as the climate changed and the environment changed, they realized that they don't have to move and escape this changing weather. They could actually establish settlements, and that's how it happened. And they established themselves in the region, and they were the first to actually, if I use the word, invent agriculture and farming, not too far from where we are today.
Great. So it sounds like, people, as they went from the hunter-gatherer to the farming, the community, and dare I say, the family became more of a unit within that culture, it sounds like.
Well, if I can, continue on that thought.
Yeah.
The first city, as we call it, or the first real city, if the word we can use, was also in Mesopotamia, not too far from here, Sumer, around 3000 BCE. So that's around 5,500 years ago. They started. So that gives you an idea how it all started. So these, as you see now on the screen, these are the original, small groups that actually lived around this area, the Halaf and the Ubaid. So these are the same group of people that actually we believe were the original inhabitants, that after them, came the Sumerians and the Akkadians and the Babylonians and the Levantine. So these are the original inhabitants, and we call them cultures because these are the early people that actually, started to use tools that have been preserved over the last, several thousand years to us today. There are still tools that these people have used in the past that actually were translated to us today. And I think that's really fascinating, that there was no culture interruption per se. It was more of a continuum of population. People don't realize this continuum. They think people disappear or populations disappear. It's very rare that actually cultures and populations disappear. This is a very rare occurrence. So these are the people that actually started it all, these cultures of community. And after the community, as they started caring for each other, they grew in numbers and they established the first city in Sumer around, as I said, 3000 BCE, around 5,000 plus years ago.
Yeah, so that's
from these centers, then they expanded. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, so you've got kind of a continuum of DNA, if you will, on the scientific side, as people continue to exist, right, and move around. But you're also saying there's also a continuum of culture. So it's not like we just get cut off, right, and people become extinct. So both scientifically and socially, there's been a continuum for thousands of years, in the region.
Absolutely, and this is something that I'm really I'm an advocate of. Is just like, cultures. We need to preserve those cultures and not to brush them away and say, they didn't exist or they don't exist anymore. I mean, we're here because they existed before us, and I believe in this cultural continuum, and I believe that it's this culture mixing that, the hybridization of culture, which make cultures evolve. And today, the way we eat, the way we behave, actually, it's still remnant of how our ancestors behaved and how our ancestors actually did things. I mean, the language we speak today, it was evolving through time, and the writing evolved through time. We can talk about this, but yes, cultures actually evolve, and we should preserve cultures. Unfortunately, every few years we lose a language, or we lose some ritual that is lost for humanity. I think. Imagine that we have a monoculture at the end. That's not gonna be good for us. It's not enriching. But anyways, this is a topic for another time.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, interestingly enough, during Rootstech yesterday, actually there was an actual presentation about dying languages and how do we help the dead speak, right, by preserving language through research. It was part of our archivist symposium. So yes, a different topic, but also I have to put in a plug, also available on rootstech.org for people to go back and explore that. How do we do that? So one of the questions, or one of the topics that comes up often, especially those who have Lebanese ancestry, is, are we Phoenician or are we from some other, different group of people? And I would love to hear your thoughts and what has the research shown you, and what kind of conclusions can we draw on this question, if any?
Well, I think this, this really dovetail into what we were talking about here, cultures. I think these cultures existed, and the Phoenician culture existed in the region for thousands of years. I think it was the Assyrians who actually came and dislodged the Phoenician, or the actual powerhouse, if I can call, of that region. I mean, if we talk about modern day Lebanon right now, Sidon, Tyre, and Byblos, and even all the way to Ugarit in Syria. So that region actually was populated by a culture which we refer to as the Phoenician culture. Now, they never referred to themselves as Phoenicians. These were the Canaanites that actually lived in that region, and these were the descendants of these three main groups that I was talking to you about. Plus, of course, over the years, we had some additional genetic input, as I would call it, from various groups in the region, outside the region, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it's this culture that existed between 2000, 2200, or some people push it even earlier, 2400 BCE, until about 600 BCE, when the Neo-Assyrians came and they basically took over the region, and then later on the Persians came, etc. So really they never went away. The culture is still there. I think the power or the dominance was no longer to them. They were dominated by a group that came and they took over the region. So really, you cannot actually efface a culture. Yes, this culture existed in the Levant, existed in modern day Lebanon, as we call it today, and in Syria. And we just cannot erase it. Yes, we are we have this heritage as Lebanese, but we have also other heritage, and we should cherish all these together. So it's not like we are Phoenician. This concept doesn't exist. Yes, we have heritage. We have Neolithic. I call it Anatolian heritage. We have a Natufian heritage. We have Halaf heritage, and we have Phoenician heritage, and later on, as people came and occupied the region, if they intersected with us and if they shared culture, we have many cultures actually right now. If we look into the Levant, we have several cultures that actually intermix together, and we cannot say we wouldn't choose which one we want to have and which ones we actually don't have. I mean, this is a personal choice, but the fact remains that these cultures did exist, and we are here because of these cultures.
Yeah. So how would you bring together the intersection of DNA and identity?
Okay, before we get to that, let me also explain the fact that when the Levant and the entire region actually started to get populated after the last glacial maximum, it was not isolated. A lot of people came, they mixed. A lot of people left, etc. So we are, yes, the core of the population is started from these three groups that I said, but we have been exposed. As I said, the Akkadians came, the Assyrians came, the Babylonian came, the Egyptian came, and then from the north we have a lot of people that the Sea people came. So we have a lot of mixing that happened. Some of it remained and some of it didn't. And what is fascinating to me is that despite the fact that people say, oh, it was a crossroad and it was what have you, I forgot to even mention the Greeks that came for a very long time. And then the Romans came, and then and then the Crusades came, and the modern Anatolian came, right? And then the Arab invasion from the Arab expansion from the south as well. So we have all these mix, all these people that actually came to the Levant or to the region. But what is fascinating is that you still see the core very clearly, and if you count all of these interactions that happen, it's very, very small, which was very shocking to me. So when you look at the DNA now, you have to bear in mind that a lot of people came and may have left some traces of their DNA in us. And I mean, there's something which probably you know about, or you may not know. In our DNA, we have Neanderthal DNA in it. Okay, so whenever you do a test right now, in any of these companies that tell you about your ancestry, they will tell you have 1% or 2% Neanderthal DNA. So when you do a DNA test, you have to be cognizant of the fact that it's going to tell you a story. It's going to tell you that, yes, your DNA is part this, part that. You have 2%, I don't know, Northern European. You have 1% this. So really, it tells you I think a nice story about how many people actually, or how many cultures actually intersected into who you are today. But really, it doesn't tell you more than this. It doesn't tell you about your heritage, because your heritage is not about DNA. Your heritage is about the culture that you inherit. It's everything. It's the language. It's the way of life. it's how you interact with people, it's what you eat, it's how you write. All of this is actually part of your culture, and DNA is a part of it, but it's definitely not the whole story. I can give you an example. So when you go to a place, and I did, I was told that you go and do a DNA test on a population that has been isolated for thousands and thousands of years in Africa, and they speak a language that no one else has spoke in thousands and thousands of years. So we went to that little group of people, literally 40 or 50 people. It took us 3 days to get there. No roads, nothing. We got there. Very nice people. And when we tested them, guess what? They had European ancestry. So it's very, very complex story to say, okay, I have a DNA test and it's going to tell me exactly who I am. No, it's not. It may tell you a nice story about things that you may not have anticipated, about something where you came from, perhaps as a family. It may tell you these little stories, but oftentimes it's not going to be the answer that you're searching for if you're looking for your own culture.
Yeah. That is interesting that you went to this remote place and they still had a mixture of, in their DNA of European. It's amazing. I know you mentioned that in your book, that's worth a read too, is, just the hardship of getting there even. So it makes it, you wonder how other people got there. It seems so remote. But yeah, I think that's an important aspect. I know a lot of times at Family Search, as we post, different information about like records and things for people, one of the biggest questions we get is, people would like to know a little bit more about their family tree and their heritage, but they're also very interested in the migrations of their family, right? Of what how did my family end up where it is today? Whether I'm in the Levant or North Africa or in the Gulf region. It's definitely one of the biggest questions people have, and they're very interested to know. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a story of survival too, it seems like, because again, as that DNA is the people who have survived perhaps environmental conditions that maybe were harsh, maybe diseases, as well as, cultural things such as wars, such as, other types of political or social situations that have, impacted those who came before them. So we are kind of a walking story, right? Both on a physical aspect as well as on a social and psychological maybe aspect as well. I know there's a lot of research on DNA and psychology. Again, a subject for a completely different day, but I think that is so true. And so we've got a couple of comments and a few comments here from people that I just would like to share with you. One of them is this individual. I'm going to show it. It says, North Africa has a different DNA. Middle East North Africa is a new division that's based on political view. North Africa especially is its western side has no links with the Middle East. I just would appreciate your comments on this. What has your research found?
Well, yes. I mean, if you look at the DNA, you can, they have different patterns of DNA signatures, absolutely. And the farther the western you go, the far west you go. So if you pass Egypt, you go Libya, and Algeria, Morocco, and what have you. Yes, you get very different DNA. I mean, culturally also they are different. I mean, if you look at the interactions they've had, North Africa and Europe, they've interacted in very different ways than how the Levant interacted with Europe. The Islamic expansion recently had a lot of movement across North Africa. They had a lot more interaction with Africa proper. which actually the Levant did not have. Did not have that. So it's a very different dynamic, and culturally, actually, you could tell that there are major cultural differences between North Africa and East Mediterranean, of course. But it's not because of the DNA, of course. The DNA is it tells you a little part of that. It tells you that there were probably more interactions with South Europeans and more Africans, but the way they interacted with their climate, with their environment, and that actually makes these cultures different than what we see in the Levant.
Yeah. Can you talk maybe a little bit about, we talk about culture, we talk about identity, we talk about ethnicity. Can you talk a little bit about, what, in your perspective, how those terms can differ in meaning and who we are?
Yes. So for me, we talked about culture. Culture is a mix, right? Culture, it's something that evolved through time, and then people adopt certain rituals, certain habits, and then it's the collection of these that actually make us who we are, including our DNA. Makes the culture who this culture is. So now when you go anywhere in the world, you can tell this is from the type of food that people eat. You say, I eat Indian food, or I eat Lebanese food, and so that's actually this is culture. If you speak a certain language, that's your culture. The way you dress. And the way you interact. So these are the cultures. Now, let me talk about ethnicity a little bit more, which is a very, I would say, I don't know how to describe that word, but it's a word that I shy away from. Let's put it this way. Ethnicity has become, in my opinion, toxic. In my opinion, and because the way people use it today does not bode well with its reality. So now we talk about ethnicity to basically immediately tell people where they're from and if they look physically different. If we look at the DNA of people, they're not very different, actually. And if we're going to start using DNA to differentiate ethnicity, although in certain parts of the world, this has been a huge problem. In North America and in Australia, DNA have been used to basically assign a certain ethnicity, which I think was very wrong, and also the interpretation from that actually was even more wrong. So really, ethnicity is a word that I shy away from. I'd rather use culture 1,000 times more than ethnicity, because when you talk about culture, this, as I said, DNA is part of it, but it's not the main, deciding factor. When we talk about ethnicity, you're looking at, skin color. You're talking about mostly really, or certain language, and that's very, very difficult for me to grasp. So I'll give you an example. So a lot of people actually move, and they establish themselves, and they become, they forget where they come from, actually. So how do you label those people? You call them ethnic this or ethnic that? No, they are part of the fabric of the community and the society. I mean, the US is a great example of that. The entire world is like that. So people move. You said it. Yeah. We are a moving, we are a moving story. We move, and we should accept that fact. Now, then ethnicity, became toxic, and especially over the last 20 years, And unfortunately, it's becoming even more and more these days, because of lack of I think acceptance of the other, and I think this should, that's what I'm fighting against. That's what I wrote a book, is because to show people that being ethnically different is the wrong thing to say, but being culturally different is good, and we should preserve cultures whenever you want, and which brings me to the idea of identity. Identities, it's of your own making. You make your own identity. You decide who you want to be. You decide whether you are French, American, Lebanese, Egyptian, or whatever you wanna say. It's yours to make, and it's, as I said, and I wrote about this. This is it's not a fixed property in time. You may feel at some point in your life that you belong to a certain culture, to a certain community, but then as you change and as you get exposed to other ideas and to other cultures, you morph into these more and you adopt another identity, which is fine. So DNA has nothing to do with that. It's a basket, as I call it, of collectibles that along your journey you collect those, and then it's okay to change your identity as you move along. I always talk about origins and roots, and I also do not like the word roots. I appreciate roots for a tree, but root for an individual, a human, is not very appropriate. I think you take your origin with you. You say, I am born in this place and I cherish it and I love it, but you may adopt another country, another land. You may enjoy it, and you say, I want to live that. Yes, don't forget your origin, but don't say, because I'm rooted in one place, I cannot move. And that's really a huge, in my opinion, a misconception. So these terms, they're hard to navigate, but DNA has nothing to do with them. And it's unfortunate that now we are using DNA to say, okay, to actually measure identity and ethnicity based on a DNA test.
Yeah. I think, responsible use of DNA is certainly important. It definitely has been a game changer, I think, for many people to kind of trace their own family, right? And to learn more about their families, and to even explore, as you say, the cultures that came before them, and maybe how that has evolved within themselves. Like, I know for myself, as my family has moved different places around the world, we can't but pick up, even, in our lifetime, some of those different things. So I think that makes, a lot of sense. It makes me think, as we think of trees, it makes me think of a little bit of grafting, maybe different aspects of cultures within people as well, or as we intermarry, then you're grafting in DNA too, or, from different people with different DNA sets. No, I really appreciate that. We really, really appreciate your time today, Dr. Zalloua. It's been really fascinating, and certainly DNA science is not a simple science. It's something that, we should try to understand some more, but I think when we use it responsibly, as you said, to enhance, our understanding of those who came before us, enhance, as we talk about family a lot in family search, enhance our understanding of, okay, perhaps the genetic aspects of it, but really, who are those people that came before us? How did that impact our identity today, our culture, what we're participating in our way of life? And really, I think there's also this, we're all, you said it, like, we're all the same, really. At the end of the day, we're human beings, right? Having a human experience, and to hopefully be more empathetic towards others, right? And to do that as well. So thank you so much for being with us. I do want to share this wonderful quote from your book that I just really loved. as we talk about DNA and identity, it says, do not search for our identity. You must make it yourself. And whatever heritage you have, be proud of it. It is through knowledge and proper tributes to your ancestors that we can forge and strengthen our modern identity. I just thought that was such a great way to look at that, you know, to honor those who came before us and to certainly press forward. So that is absolutely wonderful. Thank you again. And we encourage those who are watching to please visit familysearch.org and learn about different ways to discover those who came before you. And there's also many sessions about DNA on rootstack.org that can also help you to use DNA to also trace your family and lots of other wonderful things. Thank you again, and we wish you the best. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and a wonderful day. Take care.